wherever you're joining from. A whole mixture of looking at the list, a whole mixture of corners of the world. I'm sitting in the Scottish Highlands. It's still just about sunny here in the UK. We've just heard that Scotland isn't going to lock down for the 2-week Easter half-term holiday like all the rumours were suggesting. So my children are going to be happy when they come out of school and find that they can go somewhere in the next 2 weeks. But it's a bonkers time for everyone, and what I'm going to talk to you about and explain and explore a bit more in this webinar is in this time of uncertainty and in this time of challenge, how might we help students develop their resilience? And the way we describe that at Making Stuff Better is through developing their inner leader. And just a bit of context, Making Stuff Better is a leadership coaching organisation working primarily with international schools. We coach international school leaders primarily at the moment in Southeast Asia and China, but we are not precious. We'll coach anyone from anywhere. And my goodness, is it a busy time to be a school leader and to trying to make sense of the ever-changing landscape that schools are facing. And I guess I think with that in mind, if that's just the case for adults, you know, imagine what it might be for a year 10 or a year 9, whose life is quickly evolving at the best of times. But if we add on the added complication of COVID, it's an even more bumpy ride for young people at the moment. So we felt at Making Stuff Better that we wanted to do something about that. We came to realise that a lot of the skills and tools that we are giving senior leaders in the work that we were doing then were just as applicable with younger people. And now could not be a better time to be skilling people up, young people up, to be more resilient and have greater bounce back ability, as I call it. Because if COVID has taught us nothing else, it's that the world is not predictable, and it's been very trendy and very common in the last few years to kind of say that, you know, we don't necessarily need traditional curriculum, we need progressive curriculum, we need kids to have flexible skills. Both of those are true, but I think the latter has become even more true when we really do not know what sort of world we are preparing young people for. So I think there's a kind of moral duty at the moment to make sure that we are finding ways for young people to learn and to grow despite the adversity that the pandemic brings. And, you know, that adversity is multiple. There's the threat of the virus itself and the impact it has directly on young people and those that they love. There's the question about work. There's the question about, is school going to be in school, in a building going forward? Is it going to be in home? Is it going to be both? How am I going to do my exams? How does my ability to make relationships develop? Particularly, I think this is always pertinent for students in international schools where they are moving or they are relatively new. I know that's not true of lots of students, but it's a typical characteristics that there's turnover and that students are arriving new in school. So they may have only arrived in September and then gone into lockdown after one term. You know, how do we find and build relationships in that particular context when we're isolated from others? So I think these topics are all pertinent most of the time for young people, but again, it feels particularly prescient at the moment that we as school leaders might do something to address it rather than trying to kind of carry on as usual and hope that normality returns. So in this webinar, I'm just going to touch on 3 main points, and please do jump in with any questions as we go. There's definitely some time at the end, but it's always lovely to be asked as we go, because quite often they're the ones that are most relevant for the person asking the question, but also for other people listening in. So we've started to explore already why find their inner leader, and I'll put some more detail on that in a moment. Then I'm going to give you some examples of what that might look like, specifically from a program that we've developed for schools to use with young people. And I'll show you a little bit how that program works at the end. So at its core, when we talk about developing a student's inner leader, we are talking about developing their resilience and bounce back ability, which is very clearly not a word, but I kind of like it. And I think it maybe makes resilience a bit more relevant to young people. And the way in which we do that in coaching, or the way we talk about that in coaching, is often about coming above the line. So how do we take young people from a place of unconsciousness, a sense of sleepwalking, just going through the motions, doing what they're told, to a place of consciousness, a place of understanding how their thoughts work, understanding what's happening, how they're reacting to it, and being in conscious choice about how they react to their circumstances. And again, the aspiration here is if you could have a school of young people who are making conscious choices, and where they cannot make a choice are conscious of why they can't and why it might clash, then we're going to be equipping them far better for what may or may not be around the corner. So at its core, developing a student's inner leader is about that. It's about bringing them into conscious awareness of a metacognition, if you like, of how they think, and in turn how they behave, and then in turn how they might choose to think and behave. And that's because it's built on the premise of coaching, and kind of a core coaching philosophy is that everyone is naturally creative, resourceful and whole, that we've actually got the means to address many of life's challenges within, not all, but many. And I'm always cautious to say, a coaching approach is not about solving everything. You wouldn't want your doctor to coach you through a broken leg. You'd want him to fix it. You wouldn't want someone to coach you into how to spell it in early years. You do want someone to teach you. But for lots of life's challenges, particularly those at the moment, which are really non-specific and really hard to pin down, starting on the premise that actually we may have what we need to resolve and move forward within us already is a really powerful one. What we've done is combine that with the principles of positive psychology, which kind of looks at what are the things that we need in place as human beings in order to thrive. And again, if we go back to the kind of coaching principles, I don't want to overdo this one, but it's a really important one. In coaching, we tend to see everyone as a seed, i.e. everyone has whatever they need in order to flourish. It's just our job as educators and as leaders of learning to allow them to do that. And again, positive psychology doesn't just see life on earth as what do we need to do to survive, but actually it's what do we need to do to flourish. So again, I think the opportunity here during the context of COVID is we are very often, our brains are absolutely in survival mode. They're scanning for what the threat is. I've been doing it all afternoon. I've been waiting to hear the Scottish government's update on whether we're going to be locked down again or not. So we're scanning for the threat. But actually, how might we take this time and use it to understand better how we and young people might flourish? So those are the principles behind what we're calling the Inner Leader program. And we're trying to move students away from this concept that someone else is going to come along and give us all the solutions. And as I say, if it's quadratic equations or it's learning the meaning behind Shakespeare, then absolutely kind of straightforward teaching approach is absolutely the right thing. But for lots of life's other challenges, actually starting to accept and understand that we might have some inner resource, an inner toolkit, can be really powerful. So why is it called the Inner Leader program? Well, there's a very long answer to that, and I'll give you the short one. We've been working with a British international school, English medium international school in China for the last 3 years, primarily doing coach training for their staff and giving their staff the skills to use coaching in both the classroom and in pastoral conversations. And a bit like I alluded to at the beginning, what started to become apparent is that the staff were finding a common language and a common way of communicating with each other and a common mindset that goes hand in hand with a coaching culture. And the challenge was that this was existing in the bubble that was the staff, but it wasn't really being relayed to the students. Students were receiving coaching from staff and were recipients of coaching, but they didn't really have the mindset and the skill set that comes with a coaching culture. So we set about with Dulwich College Zhuhai to address that. And we looked initially at doing that by saying, oh, it'd be easy. We'll just train we'll just train all the kids to be coaches as well, and they can coach each other. And it was a disaster, because there's a level of emotional maturity and life experience that comes with holding a coaching conversation, which we found that not all, because as you all know as educators, a lot of your students are probably more mature than some of your colleagues, but for the vast majority, it was really hard to tap into that kind of emotional maturity in order to hold a coaching conversation. So we said, well, let's find another way, and let's find a way in which we might give these students the kind of core principles and skills of coaching, but without having to teach them how to be coaches, and without having to get them to coach each other. And a core concept of our coaching methodology is this idea that we have an inner leader, and it was through that mechanism that we created and advised this program. So the inner leader concept is this idea that somewhere within us there is a brilliant version of you that's kind of already there, that already knows the answers, that is already able to step back and think about how you might face some of life's challenges. And so an absolute central tenet of the program is introducing and exploring students' inner leader on their behalf. So we take them through a process that allows them to tap into this idea that there is an internal superhero somewhere inside that actually, if we could be in conversation with them, we could bring to the front, would really serve us well. And the benefits of that are really clear. We find that students become more resilient, more calm and grounded. They're better able to manage their emotions and therefore their work and their play. They're able to find perspective when things are feeling a bit tough or a bit clunky. And it's all based on this very simple understanding that we've got an inner authority, a kind of inner resource that is just in charge of us. And if we tap into it more, we can be far more resilient. And again, we explore this. This is a slide from the program. There's no rules about whether they're feminine or they're masculine, whether they're a human or animal form. But we just accept and explore with students that they're somewhere within them is wisdom, compassion, courage, clarity, and certainty. That they're actually, if they could tap into that inner resource, what might be possible? What might be possible if they're able to do that? So it's a really powerful concept, and we find that students respond to it really positively because it stops that kind of, I'm just going to wait to be told. I'm just going to wait for the answers. I'll just wait for Miss to tell me. I'll just wait for Sir to tell me. And you can apply that to their learning, but you can also apply that to how they manage their personal lives and their relationships with themselves and with others and their parents. So it's done very gently, and I'll show you an example of the program a little bit later, but that's just one example or one facet of the inner leader. So this idea that kids have an internal superhero, and that wouldn't it be nice to give them the facility to tap into that internal self-belief a little bit stronger. And there's our superhero pointing in various directions and telling us what to do. So the inner leader is a really powerful concept. It's kind of a core element of the program. It gives them a powerful concept, but it also gives them a common language. So it's been lovely in the schools that have taken it on. People have started to say, you know, what would your inner leader say to that? If you're not sure, what would your inner leader? I know teachers have used it as a kind of, before you ask me, you need to ask your inner leader, particularly for, you know, very, very classic classroom scenarios like I don't know the answer, or where's that book, or how can I find out? What if you were to ask your inner leader first? And what the program also gives them is a very nice kind of personal framework to manage their emotions on. So how are we doing? We've done, just kind of take a pause there, Joe, and just before I move on to the next section, I just wanted to check in and see if we've got any questions or reflections.
Yeah, we haven't got any questions so far, so please feel free to write some questions in the chat box for Matt as he's speaking, and I can ask them throughout the presentation, not just at the end.
Great, lovely, great. Let's keep going then. And yeah, here's Peter Rogers, who's Director of Community Wellbeing at a school in Shanghai. And I always mock him because he looks like he's about to go on Strictly Come Dancing or something in his profile photo, but that is the one that the school keeps. So there you go. But yeah, we've had some great times delivering it in a range of schools so far this year. Okay, so let's just go back to our plan. So we've started to touch on why you might want students to find it, and I've given you one example. So let's just take another example. So another part of the program is that once we have introduced students to their inner leader and this kind of idea that there is a core source of wisdom, then we can kind of expand it and stretch it out a bit and kind of play with it. And so we then introduce them to the fact that maybe there's more than just one source of wisdom within. Maybe there is a set of what we call allies. Maybe what if there was a team? And all the usual analogies stand true on this. There's more to a football team than just the captain. There is more to an orchestra than just the conductor. They need all of the component parts to make great music. So what if we were to throw in some additional resources alongside your inner leader, which in the program we call your allies. We call the students their allies. So again, we're trying to kind of slowly build up the conceptual understanding that there might be a kind of inner resource. And then once we're clear that there might be an inner resource, maybe there are then layers of inner resource. Maybe it's not just, maybe there's a sophistication to this. Maybe there's a wealth of rich reserve that you've got kind of within that you could tap into as and when you needed to. And we help them out here a little bit. We kind of say it's not for you to, when we talk about inner leader, we do a lot of work on the students creating and coming up with and exploring their own inner leader, what he would or she or it would look like. There's loads of fun activities that can be done around drawing it, painting it, creating it, it's describing it to others, sharing it. That concept has got a lot of mileage in terms of application. And then when we come to the allies, we offer just some examples that this idea that there's maybe some other voices within that are really powerful and want to be more available to you and want to kind of speak some truth to you. So I'll give you an example. One is this idea of the appreciator. So what if there was a voice within that you could tune into that always finds the value in what happens? And again, I don't think this could be more relevant than to the current times. What if there was an internal voice that can always find the silver lining, will always find a way of seeing what is positive? What if even in the darkest and the grimmest of corners, what if you were just to look and to actively seek out what is positive about that? And again, this isn't about trying to get kids to say everything's lovely and everything's great and everything's wonderful and make it kind of sugary and saccharine and dismiss the seriousness of the situation they find themselves in or the seriousness of what might be going on in their lives. But it's a really powerful tool to help them just start to slightly reframe and rethink and look where they can for where there might be some goodness or something, some glimmer of light to get hold of. And again, I think based on the conversations I've been having with lots of people in the last few months, like most adults are trying to do that. Everyone has managed to find some positive out of a lockdown or out of COVID. We all seem to be finding new ways of existing which have some positive elements to them. What's lovely about the Inner Leader program is it does the same for kids, but it does it through a framework. So it gives them something to hold those conversations and put those conversations around rather than just, I know your exams have been cancelled, tell me what's great about it. Like, that's conceptually sometimes quite a hard jump. But actually, if we go through, okay, what would your appreciator be saying? How would your appreciator respond? Then it quite often gives them a different way into that conversation. And one of the bits of feedback that we've had from schools that are delivering the program is that students really like my appreciator is going to be needed now because my 7-year-old daughter's just walked in. 1 second. Hello, Emily. I'm just doing something. Can you just wait outside? Thank you. No, I have to close the door. Yeah. So what my appreciator be saying now, isn't it lovely that your 7-year-old wanted to come and say hello to you, even if it did mean a slight interruption. So one of the things that schools are saying is really lovely about the framework is that the personification means it's not about them. So students quite often find it hard to say, I feel like this. This is what I think. But actually, if you can say my inner leader feels like this, or my appreciator feels like this, or this is what my inner leaders say, then it just creates a level of detachment that gives them a kind of way into sometimes quite tricky concepts or emotions to deal with, which is far more accessible. So I'll give you another example. Another example is the curious one. So a bit like the appreciator, but slightly different. The curious one is the voice that says, what if you just got curious? What if it wasn't being attached to an outcome? What if it wasn't about getting a particular result? What if it wasn't about getting it right or getting it wrong? What if you just went into this scenario and got curious about what happened or what might happen? And again, I always think when I'm coaching adults, the curious one's always a really classic one when it comes to something like a job interview or a difficult conversation with maybe a parent, where you can get really locked on, I have to get it, I have to get the job, or I have to look good. Or you get locked on, I have to get this outcome from this parent, or I need to show that I'm not going to be pushed around. And as soon as you start focusing on the outcome, you start to get yourself into a corner. Whereas what if you were to go in with a curious voice turned up and say, I know my stuff, I know what I'm doing, I've done my preparation, now I'm just going to be curious and see what happens. And again, you can think there's lots of scenarios in students' lives where actually if they were just curious and they went and just kind of had a look and went and just joined in and threw themselves in, then they might find that they benefit really positively. So there's a couple, and there's a handful of others that we use in the program and that we introduce to people in the program, to students in the program. And again, it gives them a really nice structure to think about how they might take a different perspective on what can be a really challenging time, both in the current context, but also just in normal context. So again, I'll just pause there and see if we've got any questions before I move on.
No questions from the audience, but one from me, Matt, is just around kind of what ages do you work with this? Does it work for all ages, or is there a specific group that kind of works better with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the program is primarily designed for year 9 and above. That's not to say that I don't think it could work with others. It's just that was the original brief that we worked towards creating it for Dulwich Juhai, and that's the age group that subsequent schools have delivered it to. There's a degree of kind of emotional maturity that's needed, I think, to access some of the content, and I'm sure a skilled primary practitioner will be able to modify it accordingly, but I am not a skilled primary practitioner. Okay, so let's just move on. And I'm just going to touch very briefly on the other elements. So we look at the inner leader, we look at the allies that come with the inner leader, but then we also look at the other, which quite often is the most powerful place to go searching, what are the limiting voices? So what are the limiting personas? What are the voices that students actually listening to that are holding them back and that are keeping them small? I'll give you an example. A very common one is the perfectionist voice. So what's the voice that's telling you, everything has to be perfect, and if it's not perfect, then you're not good enough? Or another really common one is the imposter voice, the voice that's saying, you're going to get it wrong, you're going to be found out. There's lots of better people who could do this than you can. So again, I don't want to dwell on them too much because there's a lot of detail there, but we take them through those voices and how we might be in relationship with those voices and manage those voices. We give them a really clear structure on how they might recognize and process anxiety. We introduce them to gratitude practices, which is a really powerful way of embedding the work of the allies. And we give them some examples of how different tools you might use to find perspective and reframe when you're feeling stuck. So all kind of tried and tested coaching techniques that you would use if you were coaching a client, just kind of distilled so that they can be used to be developed within students. And the impact we're noticing is it genuinely is starting to change the behavior of students that use it. And before we move on, I just wanted to, oh no, I'll do that in a minute. So let's go on to how it works. So again, it's absolutely designed around students. It's designed to encourage discussion and exploration of these hidden resources. And in short, it runs approximately over about an 8-week period. And at the beginning of each week, students are introduced to a new concept using what we call a learning burst, a kind of video of stimulus. They're then encouraged to discuss and explore that new concept. And as you've seen, some of them are quite big and powerful concepts. And then in turn, they're given some applications, so some actions to take away and to try. Some schools are doing that really neatly and saying, actually, we're going to run it in a year 10 PSHE program, and it's really easy. Some are saying we're going to do it in tutor time and using the materials that way. Other schools are taking it and saying we're going to look at the material and we're going to divide it up and run it as part of a kind of curriculum afternoon drop-down day where we've got lots of things happening and the students come and do this for 3 or 4 hours. So there's quite a lot of flexibility within the materials to use as you wish. And it just runs on a cycle where they have a learning burst at the beginning of the week or the beginning of the session, and then they get some application of, they get some discussion of it, they apply it, and then they go away and see how it shows up in their real life, in the real world, and then they come back and they go again. So let me just, I won't play all of it, but let me just show you an example of a learning burst. So this is what they would see if they were in the beginning of a session.
Welcome back. I'm glad you're still here. How did you get on with reframing? Have you started to see things differently? And did you find some new perspectives? Remember, just like gratitude, habit and practice are the key. So keep playing with reframing. It can really make a difference to how you see the world. In fact, we think it's so useful that we're going to spend a little more time on perspective this week. But hold on, I hear you ask. I thought this was the inner leader program. When do we get to the inner leader bit? Patience. We need to lay the groundwork.
As I say, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but that gives you a flavour of one of the learning bursts. So they'll watch the learning burst, they'll respond to the content, it will talk you through it, and then they'll apply it throughout the week. So staying on the how it works, I just want to kind of, and we're going really fast, which is great. I think we're going to be finished well before the hour, but I'm sure that's a gift that everyone's happy to receive, given how busy I know you all are. Just want to give a very quick outline of how it might unfold. How you might take it into your school if you were to take it forward. So the way we run it is we train people in your school to deliver it. So there's a full day of live training as part of an online group. It's not pre-recorded, it's all live with one of our facilitators. And it's fully experiential and engaging, where we take you through the program. We get you to experience the program so you understand exactly what it's like and what you are going to be asking the students to do. And it's a fully kind of immersive process. We only run the training at a limited number of times per year. And then schools then go away and think about how they will embed it and deliver it within their particular context. So we offer the training, which is a one-day kind of live on Zoom at different time zones, and then all the materials you need to deliver the program are provided. You get someone allocated to you throughout who can help you support. We offer, if you've completed the training, then anyone who completes the training has a 3-year license to continue delivering it in the school. And we also are building a community of practice that goes on and on about. Continues on and on throughout your time at which you're licensed to support you and help you refine the program as you go forward. It's really starting to make a difference in many of the schools that are using it, and we're getting a lot of very positive feedback that it solves a problem. And quite often the problem, in my experience, is from someone who's in charge of a wellbeing or PSHE curriculum and is stuck with the kind of, the world's changing so quickly. How can we give them something that addresses this? So again, I'll take a pause.
We have a couple of questions. We have one from Samir saying around what about motivation? A lot of students lack motivation even though they have the potential.
Oh, lovely question. Yeah, thanks for that. So that's where we often see motivation is where we see the allies in the inner leader showing up. Because what the inner leader is really good is at getting them to get really clear about what they want. And so often my experience of teaching in school is there's the lack of motivation is because they can't connect what they're doing now with what they want to do in the future. And students will often stay stuck in that corner because they've kind of carved it out for themselves, and they will start to dismiss what they're doing now because they've convinced themselves it won't help. What talking to your inner leader will do, or developing your inner resource, will actually help you to challenge that thought process and allow them to see what's really true, and start to connect the two. So we find when students start kind of talking to the wisdom and connecting with the wisdom that is their inner leader, they start to find the reason why they're there and the benefit of being there, and which in turn can improve their motivation. Any others?
No, that's the only one so far.
Great. Well, so before we go, just we are running this training in conjunction with ECIS, and because of that, we're doing an early bird offer. So if you book onto one of the trainings before the 12th of October, you'll get a discount, and we offer 10% off for anyone who is joining you in addition. So the license is per person. So anyone who goes on the training, if there's anyone on top of, there's a group of you in the school, is often the case, we offer a 10% discount for any additional members, or any additional people in the school who want to take part. We've got a bit of time, but our next trainings are at the end of this term. So there's one on Monday the 5th, which is Europe and Middle Eastern time. So that starts, I think, at 7 a.m. in Europe, which is 11 a.m. in the Middle East. And then we've got another one in China, Southeast Asia, which starts at 9 a.m. Chinese time. And again, if anyone's interested and they want to find out more, please do head over to our website and click on our programs, and you'll find Inner Leader and the link to book onto those courses. And similarly, if you do want to get booked on and take advantage of the discount before the 12th, then you can go direct to these websites, these registration pages. All you need to remember is tinyurl.com/Inner Leader Europe for the European and Middle Eastern one, or is that the same but Asia on the end for the China and Southeast Asia?
We will send the links around to everyone after the presentation, so you can access those nice and easy. Great,
lovely. So that's the Inner Leader program, and it's been a joy to be here. Thank you, Jo, and I hope that's been useful for people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. I think that would be really, really useful for a lot of schools, and it's so great to have a webinar which is kind of students focused. So thank you so much for that. As I mentioned, everyone, will be sending around this webinar, both the recording and some resources within the next couple of days, and a certificate for those who would like a certificate of attendance. So once again, thank you so much, Matt, for another amazing webinar, and I'm sure we will have you on again soon. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.